All right, so just to refresh where we are in talking about the strategic plan and the strategic planning cycles, and as we've discussed, um, whether or not you're dealing with kind of an annual setup because you're being responsive to the environment, or this is a more traditional long range plan of 3 to 5 years, you're going to go through these same basic things around this wheel. And you could think about this wheel, the strategic planning cycle, as the continuous process of improvement and refinement of what you're doing based on what your core mission and values are, which again can be revisited in light of the current environment. I think about it in terms of it being almost like we're using a lot of analogies here with dashboards. When I think about this process and this wheel, I think almost like going on a long journey across the water, and we have our compass, our sails, and then we're using all of this to tell us how the tide's going. We have our charts about how we're charting out where we want to go. And that's how this all kind of fits together. So what we're going to go through next is a creation of what's called a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. And from a SWOT analysis, you formulate your strategy. If you've already have your mission, you might edit or change that mission. You're going to think about the goals based on the information and the data you've been gathering. As we talked about at the end of the last part of the discussion before the break, you have to examine both your internal issues and external issues. And the issues could be around staff, money, logistics. It's important to have the internal team in concert and understanding and adding to the plan. But then you want to also examine external issues, and that might come from external experts, from data, from news sources, as we talked about. It could come from stakeholders, funders, but all of that helps us figure out what our environment is. And it's fed, again, into the loop of our understanding of where we're strong and where we're going. Next slide, please. So you have to start this strategic plan, development of the strategic plan, by getting organized. You have to decide that planning is appropriate at this time. We talked about that a little bit. There was this discussion has your organization done a plan? And we've talked about organizations doing plans. Where are you in that plan? Some people in our group are at the very end of the plan and looking at it. So some others, again, on this annual cycle, are kind of in the middle of it. Is it time you have to ask yourself, is it time to revisit, refresh, or start from scratch? If there's been a major sea change in your environment before the last plan. Since the last plan. It's very important when starting a plan, you decided this is the right time, you have to put together a steering committee. And some of the people in the group today have talked about being on a steering committee, or at least if you're a small organization, you have to select a person that's specifically going to shepherd and guide the planning process. Because as we've talked about, we're busy organizations, lots of stuff is going on. And if someone is not stewarding and a staff person is not stewarding that, it'll get lost, especially in rapid changing environments, dynamic environments. So it's very important to make someone to delegate the specific responsibility to a person or group of persons to keep it on track. Then you want to determine who's going to be involved, board or staff. In my experience, it's best that both board and staff be involved in a strategic planning process for it to be the most effective. If it's only the board, it can come off to staff as being top down and tone deaf, almost irrelevant to their day-to-day work because they weren't consulted about that. If the staff has total ownership of it and the board doesn't have any involvement of it, then the board can't put any impact, leadership in it. They can't take from it the stuff they need to be the best brand ambassador and leader of the organization. The best kind of way of doing a strategic plan with board and staff is that it's fully integrated. I've seen groups where there's almost two strategic planning processes going on. Board's process, staff process, and the two never meet. So they're not informed by each other. And I actually think from a board member perspective, it's kind of the worst thing because you really don't get a sense of the day-to-day, on the ground kind of interface with the environment, with the client population, that the staff can give you those insights about how this really works, as opposed to the larger, broader ideas that we generally want the board thinking about. The staff insight about the day-to-day stuff is often the juiciest bits. Those are often the things that prompt the course correction. So a mix of board and staff, particularly in sessions where there's a safe place for staff to feel like they can express themselves without fear of board perception, is very important to get the most useful kind of data and strategy to put in your strategy. When you're planning the strategic plan sessions, you have to then, if you're gonna have the staff involved, you have to set aside time so the staff can be involved. And this doesn't represent some kind of a distraction or in terms of their real work. So their staff has to be freed up. And if you need, and the way to think about that is, you may need to do something that is after hours, off site. That might influence how you do your plan. If this is something we're doing continuously as our board planning, as our strategic planning process, or it might be done in a specific kind of retreat setting where that side time has been set off. Either staff has been given that time off so that the board and staff can get together maybe on a weekend where it's not as pressured, and you can have the whole day to do something where you knock the whole thing out. So all of that has to be thought about when you're planning it. And then it's very useful to have outside resource people involved, like a consultant who's done a lot of these things and can help you with exercises, can help you coordinate the meeting to move it along. Someone's going to have to take the notes of that meeting, put them together, analyze them in some way, so that you can go, everything that you're collecting and learning can be looked at and analyzed. You also want to give everyone a roadmap of what the planning steps are so they know what to expect. Next slide. So let's think about then, excuse me. So let's think about then what's called the SWOT analysis. These are the elements of the SWOT analysis, and this is a very useful slide for you to understand what this all means. Essentially, it's taking stock of your organization. And the origin of the information, the origins of the information in that, if you look along that axis, there are internal origins and external origins of the information that's going in to help your organization make stop. So SWOT stands for, the acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay, so your strengths are, you looking internally as the organization, are the things that you want to talk about, and that's generally the things that there's a lot of internal knowledge of the organization about. It's in your press releases. It's the kind of things you think about. Whether your staff is strong, whether you're well known in the community, all of those kind of things are understood in terms of your strengths. Then there are your weaknesses. We talked about things like staff size, not having the right legal staff, the adequate legal staff to do what you want. And you could characterize that as a weakness. It could be other things. It could be financial. Whatever those things are, you're making an internal assessment. And that's why it's important. Staff is important because they have the lens from that perspective. And you want the board to be able to understand it from the real working, everyday perspective of the organization. The external kind of things come in with the opportunities. That's looking out. We talked about gathering all that information, looking at different sources in terms of press, cranes, or even just what you're learning anecdotally out in the field, how the environment is changing, and how that might actually work towards your strengths. And then there are the threats. Once you kind of have an idea of where you want to go, what's threatening you achieving that plan? What are the obstacles in the way of those plans that are outside? Your internal things are obstacles inside, and those are your weaknesses in the W. But the T's are the external threats, like the economy, like maybe legislation coming down, or ICE enforcement rules, or it could be something that's very local and that might be endangering maybe your facilities or the way you deliver programs. You want to put all of that into understanding the basic analysis of what we are dealing with now. Next slide. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to say about the last slide is that is essentially, if you go back, that's essentially another way of thinking about your dashboard. And I'd be really interested in the dashboard kind of concept if that's used inside your organization. But we're going to do a small group exercise where we're going to tease some of that out. All right, so you're developing this plan. You want to determine the best future for the direction of the organization. As we talked about, as you're gathering this information now, there has to be a group of, or a person or a group of people who will then start doing the drafting of what the plan is based on that. That's why consultants are really good, because you want the staff to be fully engaged. You don't want someone as a staff member who might have something to contribute to the plan also having to take notes, crunch things, and put them into the actual document you're going to use. But you want an agreement on what the format is going to look like. You want to know how long this process is going to be, like we talked about. Is it a continuous process, or is it a retreat form? And then in this plan, you're going to look at your mission statement. You're either going to review, refresh, or revise. Based on your review, you're going to either refresh or revise it, or you might find that it's still relevant and adequate. You want to look at the major goals. So what are those big picture things based on those metrics we talked about? What are those metrics we're looking at in our dashboard, and what's important to us? How do we measure what's success, and how do we determine whether or not we're moving in the right direction based on this data? And then you're going to also talk about the strategies, objectives related to the goals that you're talking about, what you need that you may not already have to accomplish this plan. So again, if you're using a longer time frame, that accomplishing that plan might be a resource question. So you're gonna like put all of that down to give you markers along the way towards getting to that end goal. If it's a shorter term one, then the resources might be very immediate and targeted. We need another attorney. So everything around that could go to getting that strategically right person when you're thinking about that sort of thing. And so that's related to the staff you're going to need. When you start the plan, you should have, so when you start this planning process, you have the groups, you've arranged it, you've decided what the format's going to be and the duration, and you're starting these things. Now, homework for planning participants is very key. First of all, it engages them before the session, and then engages them maybe in between sessions if it's ongoing. But what that is it keeps it top of mind for everybody involved that when we come into this space of doing this plan, these are the things that we're all on the same page. So you want to have homework, maybe a set of documents, maybe some preliminary ideas that just, maybe it's a preliminary survey to just ask them broad things. Are we doing well from your perspective? What do you think we could change? Just broad things to warm them up. If you have things that you talked about in successive sessions, it could be reviewing that, or you could give them homework about things to think of in the next session. But again, it's about the level of engagement while you have the folks. Because remember, after you stop that process, everybody goes back to what they're doing normally. And you want to keep it top of mind. So as we talked about, the scheduling is important. I like retreat ones better than I like the ongoing ones, because retreat ones, if you say everybody be here on Saturday, or the office is closed on Friday and we're all going to do that. First, it conveys seriousness. Second, it allows for total concentration, because when people are still at work doing the normal things, the calls come in, the clients come in, it's disruptive. And when you have to respond to that, and you're responding to that, it kind of takes away some of the seriousness of these sessions themselves when people aren't fully engaged. Once you've done all this stuff, you build the planning documents. And then you figure out, generally you figured out by now, either it's a consultant, staff, or some combination of those who's actually going to draft a version of this. And then as you draft the first versions of it, you will probably it's best to have feedback. Maybe not feedback from everyone who participated, but maybe from your committee, maybe from select people and staff and board to look at it, to bounce it off them to get their reaction. You can also, I've seen this done different ways. You can post your strategic plan or draft your strategic plan to selected stakeholders, external stakeholders that weren't involved in it, and see what they think about it. Often a friendly funder, a funder that you already have a good relationship, might be a good one, because they see a lot of these things and they can give it an eye of objectivity that it would be needed for it to be refined. You may not want to extend this draft portion of the plan, because it might have a lot of data in there that you wouldn't want everyone to know, because you're dealing with some problems You're dealing with the threats. You're dealing with some of your dirty laundry. So you have to be strategic about who sees that. Is it just the higher level board people, or is it everyone involved, or is it external people? Next slide, please. Again, so once this plan has been completed, the participants of it have looked at it. There's been some feedback. It reflects what the discussion was. Again, you got to decide, okay, we have this plan. What are we going to do with the plan? Are we going to publish it online so that it's something that is widely acceptable? Is it hard copy kind of thing that has to be distributed? You got to think about the costs of that in these days of duplicating something, especially if it's a long plan. You're looking at, we talked about these metrics for progress, monitoring progress. Well, there should be some subset of this team that's on the monitoring of the progress and the metrics. So once that dashboard is established for the plan and how you know it's successful, someone has to be dedicated to monitoring that, so that in real time it becomes, as we've talked about, a living document. It's just not something we put on the shelf. It's something that we use to course correct and see how we're doing. That's how you can be able to make adjustments. Then, given that you're having this continuous flow of information into it, you periodically update the plan. It may become necessary. Here it says semi-annually, as we've talked about again, the fast changing environment of immigration law, everything that's happening globally, nationally, locally, means that we might have to update this plan, even quicker than we thought we did, based on maybe a critical mass of change. Sometimes things are changing so rapidly that you've got to throw a lot of your old assumptions out. But the only way for you to be able to understand that change and how it affects you is to have a regular process of reviewing that dashboard. Next slide, please. So let's stop here from some questions. Does any of this last part of the discussion bring up anything for you all?
Phil, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Were you ever asked to read the strategic plan of an organization prior to it? Did you ever read the draft before it became final?
Yes.
Did you ever do that for an organization?
Yes. I've been involved in pretty much every stage of that at some point. And I could say that, again, as I said at the beginning of it, the best ones I've seen are the ones that they were the least hierarchical in terms of who was invited and how they were treated in the sessions and how their feedback and information was weighed. So the broader base, I guess it's like any relationship, is based on communication. So if the communication is all one way, you're only getting one kind of perspective. And then if that communication is then both ways, but it still has to be safe for the staff to basically say what, if there's a problem.
What they need to say.
They have to say what they have to say without
Absolutely.
reprisal or any kind of negative repercussion on themselves.
Right. And I can't say enough, you should allow the voice of your staff. Anyway, I won't go there.
You should allow
be allowed to say.
Right. You have to be comfortable with dissent.
Absolutely.
Or dissatisfaction. If people can't express dissatisfaction, then that means you'll never get to truth.
You'll never get the truth if you don't have the critique. Absolutely. The other question I have, given that what you just said about being able to review these strategic plans from these organizations, how much of a scrutiny do foundations place on the strategic plans of organizations? Because I do know that in some cases, you must submit a strategic plan with your proposal.
Yes.
So how deep does a foundation go in the scrutiny of an organization, even to the point of where you're saying, was there a give and take where do you see the staff voice lifted up? Are these things that foundations are looking for?
I don't know about in terms of them being able to determine how well it was conducted. Because, that's hard to ascertain.
Right, okay.
But I think the two things they're looking for in a foundation that I was always looking, first, that they did it, that there is a strategic plan. Because if there isn't one, and it's particularly, a new organization, there's a certain amount of leeway given to that. But an existing organization in the hunt or whatever, if they don't have that, that's a serious red flag. Because then, they're rudderless, they're dashboardless. It's like, where are you going? And all that. So it's very fundamental that they have one. Then once they have one and you see it, one of the things that I always looked at is if this organization is proposing to do something in front of me in a proposal, how does that jibe with the strategic plan they wrote? Is it related at all? Is the language the same? Do they seem to come from the same organization? And I can tell you that in poor ones and in badly done ones, they're almost not. They seem like they're a product of somebody else outside of this. And this proposal they're asking for doesn't even line up with what they said their goals are. So it is looked at that in those two ways. Do they have one? If they don't, that's bad. Maybe they're not ready for this grant. They need some capacity building. Maybe we'll get someone in there to help them do a strategic plan. That's if we're interested enough in them. If they have it and they're applying for something that's supposedly based on their direction, they have to jive.
Right. Got it. I just wanted to lift that up, that it's so important. And a good strategic plan, a development director, a grant writer is going to go to that strategic plan and lift verbiage from that strategic plan to put in a proposal if they're aligned. If they're aligned, it should be something that can be written into a grant. You should be seeing some of that language in your proposal. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, well, SWOT time. We are going to do a SWOT analysis. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. If not, we've been talking about it and you get a chance to actually start to think about your organization along those lines. A SWOT exercise is something that you should be doing early on and is a key component of the planning process. It's going to drive a lot of the discussion of your strategic plan, and it's important. You can't really, to do it without it. I don't know whether what you're putting in your strategic plan is true if you haven't done an analysis of the organization and where you're at right now. So we're going to do an exercise where we're going to identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your program area. So not necessarily the whole organization, but your program area, because your program area, when you do that SWOT analysis, it's going to inform the strategic plan. So we're going to do this in real time. So what I would like for everybody to do is you will leave this and you will go into the URL that we've put there. And what you're going to see is we're going to be able to all see the same screen, and we're all going to be working in real time to do it. Okay. So can everybody take that URL and put it in their
It's in the chat.
browser?
You should be able to just,
And you will see something
if you
that
click on
looks
it, it should bring
like
it up.
this. Okay. And I'm going to go and share my screen.
Awesome. So has everyone used this before? Or anyone? Essentially along the side here is where you make a sticky note. And the sticky note is the fourth one down. And you kind of click it, and based on the color coding, if you're going to do strengths, you make your you click your note, green, and you type in what that is. And
Sorry, you guys. I'm trying to get to the URL.
Is everyone there? Can someone,
There we go.
will you actually go out of the chat? But I can see people here. So.
Okay. And
So
this
once
is
you
where
type in your little note, you color code it, and you can just put it down under there. Everyone can see in real time, you know, what goes into each category. So what we'd like you to do is, just in the broadest terms, this could be your organization in general, or this could be maybe, if you're not at the helm of everything, a particular project or something that you're over. An example, particularly. So it can be a program kind of thing, or it can be the whole organization. But what are the strengths that you have going into whatever objective you have? What are your weaknesses? What are the opportunities you see in front of you? And what are the threats to you as an organization or program meeting those objectives? So you just click on the sticky note, you type, and just feel free to put it in. Everyone can actually do them at the same time.
Yep.
And then we'll kind of go over them together. And you can move, once you type it, you can move it down. There you go.
If you don't, I'll move it down for you. Don't worry about that. I can put it there.
So that was good. So what's strong about your organization? Let's all just start there. Staff dedication. That's a good one. Where's your organization? What do you brag about? If you're going to just talk to a funder or a neighbor or a relative, why are we great? Why is our organization great? Right, high workload. That's good. Those are good. Okay, need to expand our individual donor base. Good.
Get this over here.
So we look at weaknesses. Where can you improve? Where do you think you've missed opportunities in the past? Is there something internally that you all can do better? Opportunities, what's out there? What's out there to help you either build on your strength or shore up some of your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? What gets staff, board, and everyone excited about the future? Like, what's exciting? What do they think is the thing on the horizon that has to be looked at? What are the opportunities? I like this expanding what we do in the North. That's a geographical thing. There could be different kinds of service populations that you think you could do well in. Maybe there are opportunities for you nationally. You can, or there are opportunities for collaboration with other groups that are close to you. And then the threats. And with the threats, it's you could think about them in the short-term things like the regulations around immigration, maybe specific things that come up, like when you had the refugee crisis or the crisis with the at the border with the Haitians, or anything that's present. Is that it? Or is it that there's so you want to think about what are the threats? What's top of mind? I think you all think about that a lot.
Can all of you see the screen?
Well, we've got I think everyone's on it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm sharing the screen and everybody can see it.
All right, so we're gonna. So as we've had some of these up now, why don't we? I'd like people. I'm going to make sure everyone can talk. I'd like people that have put things up under strengths. Maybe you can just say why you picked this particular thing.
What is going on? Sorry, you guys.
So can I go?
I don't know where my screen went to. There we go. There we go.
So you're back.
Somebody was going to comment.
I'll comment. Okay, so I put down that we have a wonderful wonderful work culture. When I became the ED, I was like, I'm going to do things my way. so I'm very proud of the fact that I think everyone really enjoys working here, and I think it's a big selling point to encourage people to come work here.
Can you share, did you include a weakness by any chance?
I did. My weakness was need to expand our individual donor base. Very, very focused on that right now, actually.
How did you perceive that?
How did I perceive that? So I think, like many of us on this call, there's been a lot of great, state funding and government funding that's come through over the last year and a half, 2 years. And we're completely out of whack with respect to we're a young organization. We're only 6 years old. And we just, for a long time, we were keeping pace, but we just gotten so many, this isn't a bad thing. We got so many government grants that we're out of whack right now. And I've really been pushing my board, and that's why we brought in a fundraising consultant, because we've got to change that. We're going to be a sustainable organization.
Because the minute they cut that.
Well, we have that conversation all the time. That is, in fact, and I'm not worried about it in the next 12 months, but in the next 24 months, I am. So that should give us enough time to build up a nice base.
Yeah, definitely. Opportunities?
Expanding what we do into more northern suburbs. Officially we're all of Lake County and North Suburban Cook County. How heavily we advertise that is another matter, just because we don't want to get overwhelmed, but that's definitely an opportunity for us. And that's where our growth has come from, is just, basically going into one suburb and saying, hey, we're here. We want to do more work with you.
And then threats.
Becoming overwhelmed by the number of clients and not finding good staff to expand our capacity to meet growing demand for services. We talked about this earlier. I'm terrified. We've got this wonderful opportunity to work with Afghan refugees. I need another attorney. It's hard to find them.
That's good to know. You said you're looking for an African attorney?
I'm looking for, well, actually, I'm looking for, no, we're going to be working with the Afghan refugee community.
Oh, Afghan. I wasn't sure what you said. Okay. Afghan community.
I mean,
refugee
community. I badly need another attorney, another immigration attorney to help us with that.
And this is something that you couldn't really strategically plan for, right?
No.
There was no way to know that was going to happen.
Right.
And that you were going to have this influx of refugees and folks that need that status now.
Right.
So that rapid response, right? That's
right.
that thing that, so it's, wow. I'm telling you guys, have really opened my eyes in this area. Could we get somebody else to give us strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? One more person, I'm going to call on you.
Okay, I raised my hand.
Hey there, Allison, thank you.
Hi, I put for one of our strengths, community connection, because that's why we started what we do, because of our connection to the immigrant and specifically Hispanic community. And that's what sustains us, all that connection and the people that we are connected to.
Weakness?
Weakness. What did I put? Oh, fundraising. We're so busy doing other things. We are terrible at fundraising. Okay. So we need to get better at that. Not something that everybody's comfortable with.
It's one of those areas, but with a good fund development plan, maybe bringing in a consultant to help you with your fund development plan, you'll trust. With a plan, it's very clear and the fear goes away. At least you become comfortable. Maybe the fear doesn't go, but become a little comfortable.
Right.
How about opportunities?
Opportunities are grants that we know are out there that we need to apply for, money we need to ask for.
Excellent. So you know you're leaving money on the table, right?
Right.
You know exactly where to go. So that's awesome. That would be something that easily you could even identify in your strategic plan. These are the next funders that we are going to ask for funding over the next year or so,
Right.
You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
How about threats?
Threats. Oh, like we talked about earlier, ongoing immigration changes just every day, every week. You don't know, something's looming. We don't know what's coming, but yeah. So it could be good, it could be bad.
Excellent.
Yeah.
One more person? Just one more person? See if we can get one more profile.
Well, I'll go. I had to step away, but I'm back. Hello. I put in deep connections to the community via all of our community forums and our training sessions. So we find that's a unique feature of the Civic Lab, and it puts us in relationship with all kinds of folk, including you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So you're available to us, not just as clients, but as allies, co-collaborators, and then you know that we're here, we know you're there. So this is great, and we think that that's a very good thing.
I'm struck by looking at these that there is a ring of similarity,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously that has to do with the fact that you all are kind of in the same policy area, and you're dealing with similar client things and dealing with the same kind of political milieu. And so it's interesting, maybe the possibility, since this coalition exists, of cross collaboration on some of these things.
Absolutely.
For instance, you know, again, I don't know the viability of this in practical terms, but since everybody has an interest in growing legal talent, a pool of legal talent, and that is really critical, maybe a group or groups of you all can do that collectively. Maybe go seek joint funding for a project to identify talent in this way or whatever. That's just speculation. But since there's so many similarities, it does beg the question, can we do some of this stuff together?
Well, I'm sorry for interrupting, but that's why we're here together, because we all belong to this huge grant called Access to Justice. So we already are doing that.
So I mean, on your specific, if you were to look at specifically your weaknesses as individual organizations, things you need to store up inside, maybe there's a collective way to solve that particular part of what each of you has to do together.
I would tend to put some of this blame on the federal government. I think up until now, the federal government has been less than adequate around immigration, both in policy, but specifically in funding. And we all have the same funding from Illinois, which is great. And it's just a few years old, but it's because no other funding exists. And I can speak for our organization in that we're a immigration court legal service provider. Everybody gets our information that goes to the Chicago Immigration Court. So we get cases from Indiana and Wisconsin because our immigration court covers those states. There is no federal funding. There's no interstate funding. So because the federal government has pretty much, I don't know, done nothing or put their head in the sand since the Clinton administration, that's kind of where we're at. There has been a lot of advocacy around it, but I think it's time for for our senators and our Congress people to step up and actually do something.
So maybe that comes under the category of both opportunities and threats. That, you know, you have the lack of funding, and maybe the opportunity is somewhere around this idea of federal funding and restoring it or whatever, or leveraging your organization's people power to go at some of these politicians. But that's just theoretical. That's the idea that these things brought up to me. Anybody else have any thoughts about looking at all these? The ones that aren't your own, do you relate to them?
I would say yes, because there's overlap with a lot of them. There I see growth and funding as big ones that everybody is bringing to the forefront here.
Let me ask another question. If you, from where you sit in your organization, this is your look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. How widely understood inside your organization do you think these things are? I mean, they're top of mind to you, but do you think that they are broadly understood inside your organization, between your board and staff? Are these things that are talked about all the time?
Yes.
Pretty sure, I mean, we all have the same issues. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm always, I meet with my executive committee on a monthly basis. I meet with the board on a quarterly basis. We are always having these conversations. And in fact, like I said, we have a fundraising consultant, and that, I've made it very clear the board is expected to be involved with that. So yeah, no, it's definitely top of mind.
So yeah, these are the issues, these are the key components that you would want to make sure show up in your strategic plan. If funding is an issue, and it seems to be coming up as weakness and threat, your fund development section of your strategic plan should be robust. That should be something that you really put some thought to, because that's something that's a key issue that was brought up in the SWOT analysis. So that would be somewhere you know you're going to put a pin in that piece of your strategic plan. That becomes very important.
All right. Well, this SWOT, this will be kept again in the archive of today's session so that you can look at this and refer to this at further.
So I know we've already talked about this, being helpful. Clearly, you all are familiar with SWOT and have been utilizing it. So, was this helpful? The workshop as we check out today, because we are actually getting to the end of our training today. So I just want to, sort of get a pulse before we move into the survey aspect of it. Was this helpful? This piece, this right here, in terms of either reevaluating or something else bubbled up for you as you did a SWOT analysis again? Did anything change for any of you?
It brought home for me that we need to do another strategic plan.
Wow.
Right.
Well,
But you're there. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, because I've been it's been in the back of my mind. I knew we'd done it. It'll be 5 years in February, and it's been in the back of my mind that we probably need to move forward. And because we did this, I went, I actually put it on the agenda for the next executive committee meeting to talk about it.
Awesome.
Start taking the steps to move it forward.
great.
Awesome. That's exactly what we want to hear. All right, well, I'm going to move back to our PowerPoint here. And I know we've done this, so let's move it forward. And just done that. So, evaluations. So we'd love it if you could go to the evaluations page and fill out your evaluations before we leave the PowerPoint. Did I?
The link is there. We can put the link it's in this chat.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important for us to have these because they help us recalibrate and do our SWOT analysis in terms of these sessions so that we can get the best, most useful information to you. So that is it's a very important part of our process, and helps us, craft things that are going to be a practical use for you all, because that's where we are. We want to help you make you do your work and get your goals. And so it's very important that we know what to include in upcoming sessions. So we thank you for that.
So we'll give you a few minutes to fill that out. And as you're doing so, just want to remind you that your next training coming up with us is the basics of program development. And that will be held January 13th, 2022 from 9 to 11 a.m.